Griffin. This is your end of day market recap for Wednesday, August 6th. What a interesting day. Again, there's probably much better adjectives I could use than interesting. I don't know. Today, it seemed like a very peculiar day in terms of the price action. And I'll explain why. And I'll give you some of my observations. I'll give you some of my thoughts for some of the earnings moves. I spent a lot of time in, if you listened to yesterday's video, I talked a lot about, and one of the adjectives that I use to describe the behavior is erratic. You have a lot of names that are really beating to the upside and having some great reactions. And then there's a decent, it seems like for almost for every name that's going up and having a good reaction, you have a name that's going down and has a bad reaction. I will give you my take on that. Before I do, I just want to talk a little bit about what today, how to kind of categorize today, because it was very unusual in terms of the performance. And what I mean by that, if you look at the SPYs, which were up 0.8 of a percentage point, the RSP, which is the equally weighted S&P, so the same names but equally weighted instead of market cap weighting them, finished down on the day. RSP was down 0.2 of a percentage point today. So the breadth was okay. It was not great. It wasn't, it certainly wasn't great, but it certainly wasn't horrible either. Just moving down here, and like this was something that I was talking about quite a bit, was like today, every once in a while you have a day where it's like it's a Mag 7 day, Magnificent 7 day, where those names are outperforming. This is what it looked like in the middle of the day, but it didn't change much. The only thing that was down, and again, like you may think, well, Microsoft had these great earnings. I talked a little bit about this in yesterday's video, but Microsoft is the one that's been underperforming recently. Tesla had a big day today. Apple was up over 5%. I don't know why, because they're not, from what I understand, they're meeting with the president, but probably going to be talking about moving some operations to the United States. I don't know why the stock goes up on that. That's me. Usually the stock goes up on, stock normally goes up on the possibility of better earnings or a new product or a new service. I don't think Apple's introducing any of that today, but maybe it's just because it is a little bit unloved and was up 5.8%. Also, Amazon, I think, finished up over 3%. Again, this isn't end of day prices. I'm just pulling this from my midday note, which again gives you a sense of what was going on today. But this was also something, and again, you could see the link down on the bottom. Should be scrolling to get access to this on a day-to-day basis. This part of the post is free, and there was more names that were making a 4-week new low in the S&P than there were new highs. The other observation that points out, that sticks out to me, is that there, even though those tech names and in the Magnificent 7, you also have consumer discretionary, because Amazon and Tesla belong in the consumer discretionary group. That's how the S&P categorizes them. Also, Meta and Netflix and Google don't belong in tech, or are not in tech anymore. They are in the communications sector, again, according to the S&P classification. But regardless, here is that you had more names and tech that were actually weak. So I talked a little bit about that. I posted a chart yesterday. I think I brought it up in yesterday's video, but I didn't really give it that much time. But it's interesting that we're seeing a little bit of weakness there. All right. And a couple other observations, and I'll go through some of these charts with you. But, and go through a couple of my trade ideas. But just very interesting in terms of what we're seeing. And let me stop sharing the screen, and I'll bring in a spreadsheet or two, and we'll talk about what performed well. So stop. All right, so this was the performance for the day that I just kind of went over, but I just wanted to show you sectors. So consumer discretionary, which again, Amazon and Tesla, I believe those are still the two top holdings. I know Amazon definitely is, but up 2% today. Also, internet names did well today. Uranium did well today. Once again, the gold miners were up, had a further. I mentioned yesterday, I'm like, I'm going to wait for a pullback. They were up another 1.6% today. Even though gold was down today. So just very odd and peculiar to me. I get it. Some people think that gold miners actually lead some moves, but wow, they are really leading at this point. Software and tech were both up over 1% for the day. Had a good day there. What didn't perform well? Energy that underperformed. That actually started up on the day, so you could see OIH finished from the open was declined 2% today. Utilities were also soft today. Healthcare names the same. So value today definitely underperformed. Value was down on the day, and growth stocks were up 1.4%. All right, so let's get to some of the moves, and let's go through. Before I go to the aftermarket moves, I will talk about the moves today. But it seems like we're getting this again. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit from yesterday. Let me zoom in. By the way, this should be at high definition. I hope that you're watching in high definition. If you're not, let me know. But some remarkable moves here to the upside. Arista Networks was up 17%. Zeta was up 27. Astera Labs was up 28%. So really interesting. I was listening to CNBC earlier, and they were talking about that they don't like the earnings reactions. I don't like them because companies are having good earnings, and some of the stocks are selling off, right? And hence, I don't know where AMD is on this list, but I believe, oh baby, because there's a lot of names that were down more than 10% today. Holy cow! Look at how many names, right? So by the way, I'm looking at small cap names, but today there was, so including again small cap names, there was over 50 names today that were down 10% today. On the upside, there was also 44 names that were up over 10%. The only reason why I'm pointing this out is because I just think that this is more dramatic than usual to see such big moves. Now I'm sorting here by just names that are over $5 billion. Where is it? So AMD was down 6.4%. So this is very important. And by the way, again, you have to look at both sides here in terms of what the different names are doing within a sector. You can't just dwell on one name, either up or down. I think that you have to take both into account a little bit. So let me go back, and I'm gonna go over some charts with you. So I'm going to go over this. This is pretty basic information, but like I hope that everybody knows this at some point. But again, I was kind of astounded to hear this on CNBC, and a couple of people complaining like, "Oh, the company had their earnings were okay. The stock shouldn't be down this much." Guys, you have to look, and I'm saying this to the folks that were on CNBC today who said this. You have to look at what happened recently with the stock price. Right? The stock price covers all the information out there. So if it runs into earnings over the last month, right, the bar is higher than it was when it was here, when there wasn't very much positive news into the stock. Right. So so for example, the last time that AMD reported earnings, the stock went up. And it's not to say that they had much different of a quarter, right? They did say some positives the last time, but the stock was down at 90 bucks. Since then, the stock doubled. It doubled. And like, I don't know why folks are not accounting for that move, because when the stock doubles from the last time it reported earnings, right, it just is such a higher bar. You're going to need to have not the same earnings report that you had last time. Now the stock price is reflecting a lot more optimism than the last time it reported earnings. So doubling makes makes the bar so much, meaning you have to have an incredible earnings report, right? So, and the other thing that why I didn't even look at AMD is because it hit major resistance, right? It hit this last week. I believe I posted on Twitter. I know we talked about it in the trading room, but hey, the move is realized. Now, again, it's not to say that the stock is definitely, we work in a situation of probabilities, right? Where there's a small possibility or chance that it's going to go higher. but it needs to put out a flawless report. And you go back to Microsoft, like this is an easy way for me to describe this, right? Why was it down today? Why is it still kind of hanging around here? It's just because there's a lot of positive information that was already priced into Microsoft. Even though they had one of the best quarters that I've ever seen, it ran into the report, right? It's not like when it reported back here when the stock was 380. The stock was at 520. So if you're not looking and you're thinking, you're just reading these numbers and saying, oh my God, they beat earnings. That means the stock should go higher. Where is the stock been versus what did it rerun into the report? Did it sell off into the report? Are the expectations really low or are they high? That's what it's all about, guys. You can't just think of the numbers and say, oh, they had good numbers. I don't understand why they're down. Well, what did they do? Some of these names we were talking about, um, some of the stuff, it's kind of comical to me, right? This SEZL, right, is going to report. I think they're going to report tomorrow, but they were a $40 stock the last time that they reported, right? And they had a big surprise and they ran up. This is a buy now, pay later company. Even after they ran up from 70 bucks, they still went up threefold in the last quarter. So do you think that the company, just because if they beat, or like if they say, oh yeah, we beat earnings and we're you know, they just barely like top guidance, what do you think the stock is going to do? Right? It's probably going to do okay if they beat like the whisper number and guidance, but they're not going to go up another 20 or 30% unless they say that they crushed it and they're seeing huge growth, because they went up this much and the stock is more expensive, right? The stock price is reflecting a lot of positive information. It's priced into the numbers already. But again, so why am I being dramatic about this stuff? Because I'm hearing it a lot, and I'm hearing that people are saying, geez, I really don't like these earnings reports that we're getting because stocks aren't going up on strong earnings report. But I'll tell you, my head wants to pop off because they're not looking at where the stock has come from, right? And how much and how elevated the stock is. Now, there are exceptions. You know, Palantir went up on earnings after it ran into earnings, right? Because they're giddy about earnings and they're saying like, hey, we're anticipating like a huge ramp, right? Still that they're growing and they're growing fast. So again, it makes it tougher to go long these names on earnings after it's run up. Again, that's what makes earnings season so difficult. So let me kind of come back in here a little bit and we'll talk about, you know, a couple of a couple things that I basically and I'm going to now reshare my screen here. So stop sharing again. I have to, it's weird because this is just the way my computer is set up with, I'm using really one big monitor, so I can't share the whole thing. But look at the names that are moving down in the after hours. Like look at SYM. That name ran into the report like crazy. So number one, like you can't miss on earnings if you run into the report. In general, that's not a good sign. RDW is down 18%. You know, that stock also, I think, has done pretty well. TSSI, you know, again, good revenue, but the stock has really run into the report, right? So that's the case. So what's our job, by the way? Like for me, right, it's really when you look at some of these moves, some of them are kind of random. Now, I know some folks like to think that they can predict this stuff by seeing calls bought or puts bought, and sometimes that helps a little bit to see the positioning. But it's really much. But what I try to do on earnings is I'll play a couple names, and like I played AAPL today, and I used a call fly, you know, and that cost me 45 cents. And so I'm really trying to risk the least amount of money possible for if I'm going to go long on earnings. But I think AAPL was pricing in about like a 15% move somewhere there. Or I'm going from memory. So you can't like, you know, if you're going to go long one of these names, right? Again, it's basically like I think Jeff Soon said this on Twitter earlier. It's a casino, right? And that's fine if you understand that you're gambling by going long a name into its earnings report. That's completely fine. Maybe you're doing some other type of analysis where you're crunching the numbers and say, hey, I really think that they're going to have a blowout number on earnings. Okay, maybe there's probably some edge that you can find doing that, like really crunching the numbers, but it's really a tough game. All I try to do basically on earnings is just take notes of saying, hey, who had great numbers? And because what I'm doing a lot of times with that report and putting them on a list is saying, okay, if there's market weakness, I want to be buying the dip, right? After it kind of comes in and fills the earnings gap. Or if it's way extended above the 20-day moving average, letting it come back to the 20-day moving average, right? Usually buyers will reemerge in those names. So that's to me what it's all about. I think we have 88 names, not counting today, because that's probably a whole nother six or seven names to put on my earnings list. But you're looking at right now like over 90 names that have put out strong earnings, and strong earnings and the price has gone up, not in terms of strong earnings and the price has gone down, right? I looking for names that had a positive price reaction to their earnings. But I just want to emphasize one more time here, and then I'm going to move on to some charts here and what to watch going forward. Is that please look at the bad and look at the good. And I think it's been a very interesting earnings quarter in terms of the price actions that we're getting. But there's been some great reactions. You know, ALAB had a good one today. Astera Labs had a. I mean, these are great earnings reactions. Arista Networks, you're kidding me, right? Right, up 17%. You look at some of these and you're like, you have to be pleased with some of these reports. Um, Shopify had great numbers because Shopify was up 22%. So you got to take it. Now, again, I could go through the bad examples too, but man, there are some really good stories about how names crushed it and are crushing it. Right. So again, we'll take note. One of the things too I'm noticing is that some of the aerospace companies, some of them are not going up after earnings, right? So the good news is probably priced in. Now we're going to have a couple, interesting reports that are going to come up here, like Rocket Labs is going to report. Uh, Also, ASTS is another one that's going to report. Now these names are a little bit off the highs, but again, ASTS was $25 a couple months ago. $25. It's 55 right now. So again, am I going to be playing these names for earnings? Probably not. I'll probably do some low cost option to try to do it, like it's structured as a butterfly where I'm not risking a lot of money. But I mean, so again, the bar is set high for some of these companies. Again, doesn't mean they can't do a Palantir and go up even further. But in any event, so I just wanted to go over the what the indices are looking at right now. I would be watching tomorrow the top of this value area. That's 566.42. Right. So we got rejected there yesterday and fell apart, but we really didn't break down too much. But we're kind of clawing back. SPY also closed right around the top of the value area. IWM, somebody asked me about this on Twitter because I said it looked like intraday it was getting rejected at the bottom of the value area. It actually did. It's holding inside value. Again, what this means, like when same thing if you were looking at like a buy, right? What you would want to see like is a breakout and a retest, and that top of the value area should hold. If you're looking for a short, you would be looking for a break below value, a retest, and a failure at the bottom of the value area, and that would be a place to short. Right? Trading when price is trading below the value area, that means that price is weak and it's downtrending. Inside value sideways, above value uptrending. So you get a breakout and you get a retest. That's where I would be looking to do that. And I know like Mark Minervini looks at those things too, and some of the other famous traders too. They're always looking for that retest to basically go longer the name. Couple names that I'll leave you with a couple names, so I'm just not going off on rants. And by the way, like I'm also trying to help in terms of telling you what to watch in terms of earnings and understanding that it's really difficult to play these earnings reports because of the gap ups and gap downs. CRDO looks great. I got out of this name the other day. I didn't like it breaking back into the value area for the week. But I was watching this one again. Sometimes the reason why I'm going over this CRDO is sometimes I'm in a couple names. Sometimes I'm just early in a name and I get shaken out. So what I've been trying to do in my trading plan is once I see it kind of reclaim that level that I got shook out at or that it broke back into, once I see it reclaim it, I'll try it again, right? Because I have missed out on a couple opportunities last month, and I reviewed this for members in my P&L video where, hey, I got into a trade and I was just a little bit too early in the trade and it broke back down into a below a support level for me, took the trade off. 2 days later, the stock is doing what I thought it was going to do. So I am back in this one. Um, what else did I want to cover in terms of this? Couple names that I'm watching. And by the way, like here's another one, right? LEU, right? Still finished up 9% for the day, but a little tired here. Right? This one didn't finish anywhere near the highs of the day. What does that tell me? That the stock, that there's a lot of good information already priced into the stock price, and maybe some of these power generation companies are maybe due for a little bit of a pause. NRG went down on earnings. Right? Again, didn't break down, but getting back to the bottom of the range. So you look at a GEV, right? I for me, like I've got to see this name kind of come in a little bit, even though this has been so strong. Let it come in. Every little dip so far has been getting bought since earnings, right? Again, this is another one that had an amazing earnings report, but I would be more apt to buy this down into the top of the value area if we get some type of a move down this month. All right, I'm going to leave it there for now, guys. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.